Have you ridden any tank? Have you ridden a tank before? Can you say you've ever done that? No? Well, there's an opportunity to have that experience at the Ontario Regiment Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Museum. This is an Oshawa-based facility. It's Canada's largest collection of operating military vehicles, including tanks. It offers people a chance to experience them in action on Tank Saturdays. Jeremy Blowers can tell us how it all started. He is the museum's executive director, and he's on the line right now. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Nanafa.
How are you?
I'm pretty good.
All right.
Getting all set for the big day today.
Yeah, you must be. How did this museum even start or begin?
Well, it actually has almost a 40-year history. It started back in 1980 as a small club, believe it or not, called the Ontario Regiment Ferret Club. It was made up of approximately 30 ex-soldiers, NCOs of the Ontario Regiment, and it's called the Ferret Club, not because of our furry little friends, but because of the Ferret Armored Scout Car. The museum started with 7 armored cars in 1980, and here we are now with Canada's largest collection and possibly North America's largest museum operational collection.
What other vehicles do you have in this collection?
We have everything from jeeps, trucks, armored personnel carriers, and main battle tanks, American, Soviet, Canadian, and British main battle tanks. There's about 90 vehicles in the collection. 83 of them are fully operational.
And we are talking about Tank Saturdays. What happens on Tank Saturdays exactly?
Tank Saturday is a program that we started about 2011, in which to raise the interest in the museum and the collections. It's grown year over year in complexity and in visitors. What we actually do on Tank Saturday is we have a tank arena beside our museum, and we give live demonstrations of vehicles of different historical themes. So, for instance, today, this Saturday, we feature vehicles from the Cold War, that conflict between East and West that ended in 1990. So, Soviet vehicles and NATO vehicles out on the field, we demonstrate them, and then we end the day with a simulated tank battle, something that people definitely would never be able to see.
That sounds loud.
Very loud. The vehicles are loud, the ground shakes, and that's what it's really about.
Yeah.
It's about people having an experience, not just seeing a vehicle as a monument on a pad in a park or in another museum, but actually, smelling the diesel, feeling the ground shake, seeing how they operate, and really walking away with an appreciation of the vehicles and a little bit of what those who served in these vehicles may have experienced.
And how many people do you get coming out? You say it's growing.
It is growing. I can tell you that in 2012, we probably were lucky to have 50 people come out on a Tank Saturday. Last year, we saw it really started to gain pace. We topped out at about 1,200 visitors on a Saturday at our last one in 2017. So depending on weather, we're averaging anywhere between 600 to 1,200 visitors on a Saturday.
And who are the people that come?
That demographic has been changing. When we were unknown, it was mostly people interested in military, ex-service people and their families. But now we're seeing, and we've been doing exit surveys, we're now seeing a huge demographic change in those who are actually interested. 80% of our visitors are families out for an experience, to see something different. We're also seeing a lot of newer Canadians coming out and just, getting up close with real Canadian history.
It is very different. And how did you get involved with the museum?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. My first involvement with the Ontario Regiment was back in 1990s when I was in school. I joined the 1913 Ontario Regiment Cadet Corps, so became familiar with the Ontario Regiment, went off to university, studied history, planned on being a teacher, but eventually followed the money, got into e-commerce and the auto industry, And back in 2012, I re-engaged with the museum that I knew that was here, but it had grown significantly. It was still completely unknown to the public. I used to call it Durham Region's best-kept military secret. But the collection had grown to about 60 vehicles at that time, all operational. So as a volunteer, I jumped in. I saw that they needed help, that if a museum, which I thought would be a national treasure, was to survive, it really needed to be well known. It needed to have more outreach, more programming to engage the public. And I started as a volunteer.
You mentioned being in the cadets in the 90s. I think we were both then marching, because I was also I was a private for a little while in Aurora.
You were?
Yeah, and I actually remember doing an exercise with a tank, and I think it was Petawawa. We did one of these 2-week exercises. Do you have an experience of being in a tank a long time ago?
Well, the funny thing is that when I was a young cadet, we would come out for weekend exercise here at the Oshawa Airport, and they would bring out those Ferret Scout cars. And part of our weekend exercise is the Old Ferret Club would give the cadets the experience of operating in a small armored military vehicle. That was my first exposure.
Wow. Did you get any negative feedback that you're glorifying war?
Not really, because we don't really glorify the conflict. We concentrate mostly on the technology of the vehicles and also the experiences of those who served. So, we never celebrate, we commemorate the conflicts.
Now, about the veterans of the Canadian military, how much involvement do they have?
Well, as I said, the organization started back in 1980 with just all ex-NCOs and officers of the Ontario Regiment. And as the fleet grew, the volunteer base had to grow, and different skill sets and tool sets had to come in to make it what it is today. So I would still say that it's about 60% current serving or ex-serving military, not only from Canada, but from around the world, and about 40% civilian and all the expertise that they bring. So it's still, we're very, very connected and involved with the military. Actually, because of our fleet and our facilities, we are actually used often on training courses. They'll bring a course of new recruits down from Camp Borden on their driving course. They'll stop at the museum, use our tank arena for training, and use our collection to teach the new recruits about the history of armored warfare.
Oh my goodness, you're making me think it's possible I was there. Anyway, you've got so many vehicles operational, and they must be so expensive. So how do you generate enough revenue to keep them running?
Yeah, that's sort of what Tank Saturdays and, as you discussed in the opening of the show, Tank Rides is all about. Keeping any fleet operational. If we had a fleet and they were all the same, it would be easy. But since we have such a wide variety of vehicles, and we're talking some of these are 70, 75 years old when you're talking about the Second World War vehicles. So basically, looking at the Sherman tank is like looking at a classic car. It's not easy or inexpensive to keep them running. And then the more modern vehicles in our fleets, like the Leopard tank, we're still able to get parts in that both available because it's still an operational vehicle on the open market, and we get some help from the armed forces as things go into disposal. So it is very expensive, and that's why we need to open up our programming so that these vehicles remain operational. So we have our Tank Saturdays, and 2 years ago we started our Tank Ride program that gives people the opportunity not only just to see the vehicles, but to get in the vehicles and go for a ride, learn more, see the interior, and really get a hands-on living experience of what it was like to serve in one of these.
Sounds like quite an experience. Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing this.
No problem.
Have a great Tank Saturday today.
We will. Thanks again for having us and for your interest.
Jeremy Blowers is Executive Director of the Ontario Regiment Royal Canadian Armored Corps Museum. It's located in Oshawa, and the next Tank Saturday is today. If you want more information, just look.